There are two parts to this chapter, and it's actually not as complex as it seems. This is one of the few parables in the Old Testament. In order to understand it, we have to go back previous chapters. Gideon had 70 sons. We have no idea how many daughters he had, but we know that he had 70 sons. One of the 70 sons is talked about in this chapter. His name is Abimelech. And another one is talked about in this chapter, and his name is Jotham. And what we find is that Abimelech decides that we'll go back just a little bit more, and that is Gideon, because of his great heroism in helping the people free themselves from tyranny, was offered the chance to be king, and he turned that down. Then his sons were offered the chance to be kings, and they turned it down because they thought there shouldn't be a king, God should be the king. Now, what happened was Abimelech went to his mother's family's group, and he persuaded them to make him the king. Now, he was a son of Gideon, but not through one of Gideon's wives, through a concubine, a secondary wife. And he went, when he had the agreement to be made king, he went back to the family place and killed 68 of Gideon's sons on one rock. The only one he didn't get was Jotham, who hid himself. And Jotham hid himself, if I remember correctly, on Mount Gerizim in a spot that was like an 800-foot high cliff. Would have been tough to get to. And when Jotham sees the men of Shechem, who were the family of Abimelech, going to crown Abimelech king of Israel, whatever they had control over, he stood up and he called out this parable. And the parable basically was this. There were trees, and they wanted to have a king. Now, the trees were symbolic of the leaders of Israel, and so they offered to a tree a chance to be king, and the king said no. They taught the sons of the king of the trees, faithful trees, and the trees said no. Those faithful trees would have been the sons of Gideon. They turned him down. And so finally what they did was, and this is where the imagery is, a bramble bush. That is a vine with thorns, which was symbolic of Abimelech. Means something with no spine, something that isn't strong, something that just crawls around the ground and basically just spins around stuff and it's got nothing, not good for anything. It's certainly definitely not good for wood, not good to rule over anything, zero. It's a garbage plant as far as they were concerned. But the bramble consented to be the king as long as all the trees would do exactly what it said. And if the trees didn't do exactly what the bramble said, then it would send fire out to devour the trees. The cedars of Lebanon was what it was talking about. And so and then Jotham takes off. Now, verse 22 through verse 57, which is the end of the chapter, are the fulfillment of that story. And we see how the people hate Abimelech, how he doesn't do any good, and how the men who made him king over them plotted to remove him, plotted to kill him, and were in fact killed all themselves. A horrible lesson. But we see what happens with political intrigue. We see what happens with family intrigue. We see what happens where there is no God worshipped, where life is not respected. All of these things happen because these people refuse to live by the rules that their ancestors accepted, that they accepted, of living as God wanted them to live. It's just that simple. And it happened time after time after time. In our lives, we need to make sure that there comes a point in time, early in our lives, we hope, that we learn the lessons from these people, learn the lessons of their folly, their stupidity, their ignorance, their hard-heartedness, their stiff-neckedness, and say, Lord, I'm going to do what you want. And that's what it's all about. That's what the scriptures are all for. Is examples after examples after examples. There are good examples and bad examples, but they're examples. We don't have to do the bad, stupid things that they do. And that's what we learn from Jotham and from Abimelech.